Liz Truss is one of the two remaining candidates for the job, and she says that if the Tories make the wrong choice, the country is heading for recession. Well, I'm delighted to say the Foreign Secretary joins me this morning here in our studio.
Good morning, Nick.
You could be Prime Minister in about 46 days' time. We're going to talk through your plans, your ideas in this interview. But I want to start by talking about you. As you think of that very real possibility, is there anything that frightens you about the job, that makes you anxious?
I've spent 8 months as Foreign Secretary. And you're right, Nick, we face an incredibly challenging time. In that time as Foreign Secretary, I've shown I can be tough. I've shown I stand up against aggressors. And I've shown I can get things done, whether it's the toughest sanctions regime on Russia, whether it's sorting out the issues with the Northern Ireland Protocol to make sure we deliver the full opportunities of Brexit. I can get stuff done. And that's why I want to do the job. We are in very, very difficult times. We need to be bold. We cannot have business as usual for the situation we face now. And we need somebody with the toughness, the grit, who is prepared to take on the Whitehall machine and drive through change.
That's the pitch. Toughness, grit, the bold plan that we'll come on to in just a second. I just want to ask you that human question again, because people don't know you well outside the Conservative Party. They want to know what makes you tick. Is it all this confidence that we hear when you speak in interviews, or in the human way that every Prime Minister I've known and reported on has, things that worry you? What makes you anxious as you look ahead?
What I worry about is I worry about the future of our country and the future of freedom and democracy. I think we're at a critical stage in world affairs. We've never had a threat like this on European soil for a generation. So my biggest fear is that aggressors will have some kind of success. And I think that would be a disaster. You know, we are in a fight between democracy and freedom and autocracy. And when I was growing up in the sort of 1980s, things were moving in the right direction. We saw the Berlin Wall fall. We saw freedom being brought to huge numbers of people. My biggest fear is that could be rolled back. And I think that's the biggest challenge we face. But I'm the kind of person, Nick, just to answer your question, I think every day when I get up in the morning, what can I do to change things? I'm impelled to do that. I am pretty hardworking, pretty direct, and I will bulldoze through, frankly, the things that need to get done.
Well,
and that is my
bulldoze, they're saying toughness, they're hearing grit, and they see you dress and model yourself on Margaret Thatcher. Because you're saying to people,
I don't accept that. I am my own person, Nick.
It's just a coincidence
I'm
that
from
you have a series of photographs.
I'm from a very different background. I grew up in Yorkshire. I went to a comprehensive school. I am somebody who has worked all my life to get things done. And that's what I want to do in the job.
Getting things done, and your presentation, if you don't want to accept that you're modelling yourself on her, is that, like her, you are a conviction politician. Now, there's a problem with this, isn't there? You keep changing your convictions. You campaigned for Remain. You signed a parliamentary motion saying it was extreme and outdated. Just listen to this, what you said in 2016 at the time of the referendum.
I do think it's in all of our interest to communicate the real impact on the ground, the real impact that this would have on jobs, on livelihoods. Because what we know is less trade would mean fewer investments, it would mean fewer jobs, and that will feed through to people's incomes.
I don't want to re-litigate the Brexit debate. People are bored of it. But this is a question of your judgment. Why did you get it so horribly wrong?
When people voted for Brexit in 2016, I fully embraced the choice that the people of Britain have made. And some of the concerns...
Or have you just changed your mind because the people didn't agree with you?
I was wrong. I was wrong, and I'm prepared to admit I was wrong. Some of the portents of doom didn't happen. And instead, we've actually unleashed new opportunities. And I've been, Nick, one of the leading figures driving those opportunities, whether it's the dozens of trade deals, including the deal with Australia, that I achieved, whether it's the work that I've done at the Foreign Office, leading the free world on
But you've
sanctions.
just
So
admitted that you got it
embraced
wrong.
it.
You made the wrong judgment.
Yeah.
And the reason this
And-
matters, if I may, I'll just put the point to you. The reason this matters is because it's a question of whether you really are a conviction politician. You talked about the fight between democracy and freedom with Mrs. Thatcher. You were going to Green and Common with your mum. Now, you were very young at the time. We understand you didn't
I was
get a
7
choice.
years old, Nick.
Then you joined the Liberal Democrats. Then you gave a talk at the Liberal Democrat conference calling for the monarchy to be abolished. Then you're a Remainer. How can we be sure that everything you say with conviction now, you won't unsay in 6 months' time?
I am not a traditional Tory by background. I had left-wing parents, so I have left-wing parents. I, went to school in Paisley in Yorkshire, which, we're now doing very, very well in those parts of in Yorkshire, but we certainly weren't at the time as Conservatives. And I have developed my political views and ideas. I think the idea that somebody should have the same views age 17 as age 46 is completely.
No, the question is
it's
whether you have the
completely
same
ludicrous,
views
but
as a
at the
cabinet
heart-
minister on one of the central questions of the day.
At the heart of this, Nick, is the fact that I believe that we waste huge amounts of potential in this country. I went to a comprehensive school. I saw my fellow students being let down by low expectations and lack of opportunity. And what motivated me to go into politics is to want to unleash those potential, to allow people to control more of their own money, which is why I believe in low
let's talk about
taxes.
that.
And of course, over time, my political views have developed. But what you will always get from me is somebody who's completely honest about what they're thinking. What you see is what you get. When I make a promise, I deliver on that promise.
Okay.
And I've done that every single time. And when I make a mistake, as I did supporting Remain in 2016, I admit that and
Sorry to rush you
I
on,
move
but I
on.
want to come to what you've described in the Daily Mail today as your bold economic plan, because you're keen to unveil it. And the reason it matters, it's another change of conviction, isn't it? You voted for the tax rise that this government brought in. You endorsed Boris Johnson saying that there would be a £38 billion increase in spending on NHS and on social care. And now you say it needs to change. So why do you now say Britain has to rip up the economic policies that were pursued around the cabinet table that you have been sat at?
Let's be clear. When I sat at that cabinet table, I opposed the national insurance rise before it happened. And I tried to stop it because I thought it was a mistake. I thought it was a mistake to miss our manifesto commitment, to break that manifesto commitment. And I thought it was a mistake to raise taxes in these very difficult economic times when we need to drive growth.
So looking
but
ahead,
I'm a
what's the
loyal
plan? What's
person,
the
Nick,
plan?
and I want listeners to understand that when you're in a cabinet, you have the debate about a policy, you put your point of view. Frankly, I didn't win that argument. The Chancellor won that argument. We went ahead with the policy. I'm a loyal person and I went along with cabinet
let's
collective
talk about the future.
responsibility.
Let's talk about
But
the
I was
future.
clear, it's wrong at the time. And it's even worse now because we're in even more difficult economic situations. I also think it's very wrong to raise corporation tax just at the time we need to be attracting investment into our country, getting more businesses going, levelling up all parts of the United Kingdom. We should not be raising taxes.
Shouldn't be raising taxes. That is very clear, and that is part of what you call a bold new plan. Now, one estimate, it's £38 billion a year you've been spending. Is that a reasonable estimate?
I'd say that's slightly high, but it's around that figure.
Okay, so 30 odd billion, let's call it that, which is, not a drop fiver. This is a vast amount of money. And am I right that when you say bold, what you mean is borrowing to cut taxes, unfunded tax cuts?
Those spending plans that I've laid out and the tax cut plans that I've laid out are affordable within our current fiscal rules. So we would still see debt falling after 3 years. That's very important.
Well, that's a fork.
But it's
a gamble.
important. It's important to note, Nick, that raising corporation tax, choking off investment, choking off growth, is going to make it harder for us to pay that debt back. I also have, alongside the tax cuts, a bold programme of supply side reforms to generate growth in our economy, because you can't tax your way to growth.
Okay.
The fact is we've had economic policy, not just under this government, for the past 2 decades. There's been a consensus on our economic policy, and it hasn't delivered economic growth.
Let's
And
focus
if we
on
want
borrowing for a second before we get to the other positives that you want to talk about. Because the criticism is that this is, to use Rishi Sunak's word, it's socialism, it's something for nothing economics. Do you know what our debt interest is at the moment?
Well, I do, Nick. I know we've got significant debt interest, but
Roughly.
can I?
It's not a trick question because you've been busy this morning.
It's,
Do you know roughly what it is?
Tens of billions of pounds.
Yeah, well, this morning it was double the previous monthly record, is 19.4 billion. New figures. There's no reason you'd know that straight away. But what will?
Nick,
why is it wise to add to borrowing? And if it was so wise, why didn't you have the conviction of voting for Jeremy Corbyn to become Prime Minister? He was all in favour of doing more borrowing.
Nick, we've got the highest taxes for 70 years.
I'm asking about borrowing.
And we've got lower debt than the United States, than Japan, than Canada.
That's what John McDonnell and Jeremy Corbyn said at the
No
last
other
election.
countries are raising taxes. And the OECD has described our current policy as contractionary. And contractionary essentially means policies that lead to a recession.
Understood.
So
you're making a gamble on growth.
what I'm saying is keep taxes low, do the supply side reforms, get growth going. That is the way to increase tax revenues. So what I want to do is increase tax revenues by growing the economy, not choke off growth by raising taxes.
Will
no other
borrowing that
country,
sort of money-
no
Let me
other
just ask a
country
question.
is
Yeah.
following this
Listen,
strategy.
understood.
No other country is following this
Will
strategy.
borrowing billions of pounds, you say over 30 billion pounds, increase or decrease inflation?
My tax cuts will decrease inflation.
Really?
Because what they
Can
do...
you point to a single chancellor, a single governor of the Bank of England, single leading economist who thinks that cutting taxes with borrowed money does anything other than increase inflation?
Patrick Minford, who's written an article about it this weekend.
There's one. There's one.
But-
He is distinguished in many ways, but he is not what I just listed. He's not one of the leading economic thinkers in this country.
Nick, we have had a consensus of the Treasury, of economists, of the Financial Times, of other outlets peddling a particular type of economic policy for the last 20 years.
Well, here's another
And it
conversion
hasn't-
from you back to
It
that policy
hasn't,
when you were
it
Chief Secretary of the
hasn't
Treasury.
delivered growth.
But you-
I controlled spending when I was Chief Secretary, and I was Chief Secretary for 2 years. But what I know about the Treasury from having worked there is they do have an economic orthodoxy, and they do resist change. And what people in Britain desperately need now is change. We need to unleash investment in our country. We need to get the EU laws off our statute books and be attracting more funds, for example, from pension funds into high growth businesses. That is what we need to see. But
Let me ask you a specific question.
You didn't
Just
let
before you do. Oh, go on.
you didn't let me answer my point about why my tax cuts are not inflationary. The reason is reducing national insurance, reducing corporation tax increases the supply side of the economy. And the reason that we have inflation is it's a supply shock combined with a slightly loose monetary policy over time.
But
that is
I
the
put it to
issue.
you,
That is the issue, Nick. So
okay, understood.
those
Let me please
reductions
just put a
are
question
not
to you.
inflationary.
That is a gamble in the end, and it's a gamble on the medium and the long term, which is that tax cuts will stimulate growth. Now, in the short term, you don't
economic
have
reality.
you
It's
don't
not a
have-
gamble. It's an economic reality that the higher
Well,
taxes
it's an
you
economic
have,
reality
the
that-
more growth
that this
is
government
choked
has not
off.
believed in and done, but you now do, and you can only quote one Brexiteer economist, Patrick Minford, in your favour. So I want to ask you a specific question. The National Health Service and social care. We were told by this government, just to repeat, your government, the government you sat round a cabinet table being a cheerleader for, that we needed more money for the health service. And in Boris Johnson's words, not Rishi Sunak, Boris Johnson's words, this would raise 38 billion to spend on health over the next 3 years. If your gamble doesn't come off, that you stimulate growth, do you cancel those 30 new hospitals? Do you cancel the nurses and the doctors under a Liz Truss government?
I'm completely committed to that NHS spending, to the hospitals, to the doctors,
Well,
and the
everybody's
nurses.
committed to a better health
What
service.
what
I'm
is the
asking you, what happens
gamble,
if
Nick?
the gamble goes wrong?
What is the gamble, Nick? Is what we're doing at the moment, because currently the United Kingdom is projected to head for a recession. So we need to do something different in order to get growth going, in order to put money in people's pockets. And that's also important. People are struggling with the cost of living. It is wrong to be increasing their taxes at the time when it's very difficult for people to pay their bills.
What else would you do for the cost of living? Because what we know is that there's £1,000 a year hit coming in September with another energy price rise. Postponing a planned tax rise won't deal with that £1,000 extra that people will be expected to pay. So if Liz Truss was Prime Minister, what do you do about that?
Well, first of all, I'd be honest with people. There is a massive global economic shock, and that is causing higher prices here in the UK. And whilst the government can and should help, putting more money in people's pockets, we cannot solve the whole problem. So what I would do is reduce energy bills by having a moratorium on the green energy levy. I would reverse the national insurance increase, which I didn't support in the first place.
I do want to get some
but also, I would do more to unleash the gas supplies that we have in this country in the North Sea, making sure that we are increasing our energy supply.
I want to move you on because you will know, and this is why I asked you the first question about what worries you, that what defines most prime ministers is not what they plan to do, not what they hope to do, not what they promise to do, but the completely unexpected. The Iraq War for Tony Blair, the banking crisis for Gordon Brown, COVID for Boris Johnson. What makes you believe you have the qualities if the phone rings at 3 a.m. in Downing Street and, for example, you're told China has invaded Taiwan?
I've shown in my time as Foreign Secretary, when the phone did ring at 3:30 a.m. saying that Vladimir Putin had invaded Ukraine, we mounted an immediate response with our allies from the free world, and the UK led that response on everything from sanctions to political support for Ukraine to standing up to Putin and putting him under pressure and leading that coalition.
Get that call in a few weeks' time.
What I've shown, Nick, is I'm tough under pressure.
Yeah.
You know, in the jobs I've done, I've dealt with some of the worst floods for a generation. I've dealt with the worst prison riots since Strangeways. I've dealt with the worst war in Europe.
Well, let's imagine that pressure, could we, if you would? That the phone goes and we're told that there is a full assault once again on Kiev. Would you contemplate as Prime Minister, given what you said, that we're in a fight between democracy and freedom, do you contemplate what so far has been unthinkable, which is the use of British force in some way to win that fight if you're Prime Minister?
No, I don't. We are doing all we can to support Ukraine. We've led the international coalition on sending weapons. We're putting the sanctions in place. But I do not support the direct involvement of UK troops.
In any circumstances. Well, look, that couldn't be clearer. I ask you because some people think you're trigger happy, you see. You suggested that we should arm Taiwan until the Defence Secretary corrected you. I spoke to someone very close to Boris Johnson who, and he was joking, but he was making a serious point. He said, thank God Liz Truss isn't Prime Minister at the moment. We could be in a nuclear war. Do you accept that in your own words that you said at a recent hustings, I'm sometimes excessively over-enthusiastic. I sometimes have to rein myself in. Is that what we want from a Prime Minister?
What we want from a Prime Minister is somebody who is bold to deal with the very, very difficult circumstances we face now. This isn't the time. Well. This is the time. This is not the time for business as usual on the economy. What I have demonstrated, and I've worked very closely with our allies like the United States, like the EU, is that we need to work together as the free world to counter the increasing threats.
I was asking about your character and personality rather than the detailed policy. But let me come to a last
But my character and personality is somebody who has led and helped lead that coalition with our allies.
Who've seen you close up, and they some of them, lots of people are backing you, but some have a worry about that. Let me end with why I began on character. It's not just because I've seen Prime Ministers defined by the unexpected. It's also because it's the only reason we're having this conversation now. We're having a conversation because your party in the end judged that the character of Boris Johnson was wanting. Do you agree? Or like those 4,000 Conservative activists who are writing in saying that they wish he was in this leadership contest, do you actually think in many ways it would have been better if he carried on as Prime Minister?
I wanted Boris to carry on as Prime Minister. I think he did a fantastic job with the 2019 election, winning us a massive majority. He delivered Brexit. He delivered the vaccines. Regrettably, we got to a position where he didn't command the support of our parliamentary
But to
party.
be clear, despite the rule breaking, despite the law breaking, despite what many people now are perfectly comfortable describing as lies told about what he did and what he knew in certain occasions, your judgment, Liz Truss's judgment, was Boris Johnson remained fit to be our Prime Minister.
Boris admitted that he's made mistakes.
My question was about
He
your
admitted,
judgment.
well, my judgment was he admitted he made a mistake or several mistakes over the course of the last year. But the positive side of the balance sheet was extremely positive.
So you're the continuity Johnson candidate.
What I am not, Nick, is the continuity economic policy candidate, because I think that is where we didn't get it right, and we haven't got it right.
Liz Truss, Foreign Secretary,
Thank you.
candidate to be our next Prime Minister. Thank you very much indeed for joining us, and congratulations on making it into the last two.